So, welcome everybody to our second talk in our winter series of the Bovey Tracey local group from the DWT. Hopefully you'll find this a reasonable distraction from the trials of lockdown. We were very pleased with the response to the first talk. We reckon we had an audience of between 70 and 80 for Pete Burgess's excellent talk on rewilding. So we were a bit concerned that people wouldn't like using Zoom, but it appears to have gone down quite well. So we have access to a Zoom account through the Devon Wildlife Trust, which puts a limit on our audience of 100. In the same way our face-to-face meetings have a limit of 100 as well. And sadly, as a result, there are some people out there who haven't been able to get in because we seem to have outstripped that number of people applying for tickets. So there's also been a slight hiccup in that you'll have seen, those of you who got in, that there is the option of either having a free ticket or having a ticket and making a donation to the Devon Wildlife Trust at the same time. And because of the mechanics of organising that within Zoom, and because of your unending generosity, the combination tickets of donation and access sold out very rapidly. And then a few people came in and tried to join and thought that there were no tickets left at all, when in fact there were some free tickets left. So we are going to try and address that next time and see if we can change the split between donating and non-donating tickets. So I apologise for that, we will try and redress the balance next time. But in the meantime, those of you who missed the opportunity to donate because there were no donating tickets left, you can still go to the DWT website and make a donation there. So please feel free to do that if you so wish. So before we go on to tonight's talk, I've got a few quick announcements to make. Firstly, that our next talk in this series will be on climate change, the weather, and how this affects wildlife. And it's going to be given by Vicky Pope on the 15th of December, which is the third Tuesday, as usual, at the same time of 7:30. And again, you can arrange to get access to this through the Eventbrite website, but I will send out another email newsletter with the details of how to do that. There was some consternation this time because people hadn't actually received an email giving them the access details by yesterday. And we checked with Eventbrite, and apparently they send these out at 12:30 on the day of the talk. So you should have received one anyway, despite the one that I sent out in addition to that. The other thing you can do is, when you get a confirmation of the booking of your ticket, if you just scroll right down to the bottom of that, and there's a lot of stuff to get through before you do, actually the access details are printed there on your booking confirmation, so you can get in using that as well. So, other pieces of news, the East Lounston Bluebell Woods and Soggy Meadows, which have been a DWT reserve for some time, were left to the trust by Rudolf Neufeld some years ago. Thanks to generous donations from local supporters, the trust has been able to buy an extra 3 adjacent fields and also some more wet woodland there. And so that's probably going to be worth a visit. Things you'll see there, lots of waxcap mushrooms, marble white butterflies, moths, hoverflies, some wasp spiders, so all sorts of things to be seen there. And then you may have seen on the actual main DWT email newsletters or on the website that they have also acquired a new reserve on the south edge of the Halden Hills at Idford Common. Which is a very exciting prospect, and visitors there are going to be able to see anything from nightjars to lizards and adders and blues, dark warbblers, stone chats, etc., etc. So those are things that you might care to bear in mind, and maybe somewhere to go out and have a quick bit of exercise during lockdown. So. Can I just ask people just joining, if they wouldn't mind just muting their microphone and closing down or stopping their video feed so we can maintain enough bandwidth during the talk. You can do that by clicking on the icons on the control bar where it says mute and stop video. Otherwise, when you chatted to each other, everybody's going to hear you. So next thing to just tell you about is the DWT AGM, which I think is to be held on the 21st of November. And again, registration will be via Eventbrite. I have to say, I myself struggled to find details of exactly how to get onto that, but I think the DWT website should have some details as to how to get into that. Finally, a little bit about Wildflower Meadows. Some of you may know about the Moor Meadows website, and I've been asked to draw attention to the fact that there are 6 very good short films there narrated by John Walters about all aspects of Wildflower Meadows. And you're heartily recommended to go onto the Moor Meadows website and have a look at those. I think you'll enjoy them. I've also been asked to draw attention to DWT's new crowdfunder. A couple of years ago, there was a crowdfunder that helped support people turning thousands of acres into wildflower meadows, and they have set up a new initiative to do the same again. And at the moment, there is in process a crowdfunding mechanism which is aiming to raise about £6,000, and I think they've raised about £3,670 so far today. And the idea is to create a hub which will enable people to share knowledge and expertise, and in some cases equipment and access to instruction on how to use this, and also to wildflower seeds for those who enthusiastically want to set up their own wildflower meadows. They're asking for donations, and donations of sufficient volume will actually attract a thank you present of a packet of wildflower seeds for you to perhaps put down in your own garden and create a wildflower patch. So there we go. So on to tonight's talk, I'm very pleased to welcome Jasmine Atkinson, who is Devon Wildlife Trust's Wildlife Communities Officer, has been for a couple of years, having done many other roles previously. She calls herself the chameleon of the DWT, so there we go. She's going to talk to us about everybody's favourite, the hedgehogs. And to make sure that you can hear her, can I just remind you to mute your microphones, stop your video. If you want to ask questions, you can ask questions using the digital messenger facility on Zoom. There's a little speech bubble on the control bar which you can click on, and it will come up with the messenger apparatus there. Could you please make sure you direct your questions to John White and not to everyone? It's just a little bit less distracting for Jasmine when she's talking and she doesn't have the questions flashing up in front of her on her screen all the time. So digital messenger to ask questions. John will then collate them and hopefully ask questions for you around different subject areas as they come through. There are already some being sent in ahead of the talk anyway. Finally, just to let you know that this talk is actually being recorded, as was the previous talk, and will be available for later viewing through DWT, I think, and possibly YouTube as well. So it will be possible to listen to Jasmine's talk again, or show it to other people should you so wish. And I think she's going to be giving it elsewhere anyway, so we can hear more about that from her. So without further ado, it's over to you, Jazz. Welcome to our local group meeting, and we look forward to hearing your talk.
Thank you, Simon. Okay, I'm going to try sharing my screen now, so hopefully everyone's going to be able to see this. Excuse me whilst I try and sort out the technology. Right, so hopefully that's all okay. If it's not, I'll let Simon let me know. So as introduced, I'm Jasmine. I'm the Wildlife Communities Officer for Devon Wildlife Trust. And Bovey Tracey local group asked me to talk about hedgehogs today, which is a lovely topic to be able to talk about, especially in these strange times when our gardens are becoming more and more important as we're all stuck at home. And actually, we've had so many people saying how important nature is to them, to their mental health at this time. So a great thing to talk about. I'm gonna kind of start with the hedgehog basics, a few facts, and then talk about their range, their population status, a bit about why they're threatened, and then how we can help hedgehogs, especially in our gardens. So this is our hedgehog on the left, the Western European hedgehog. Very easily identifiable. You can see on the map there its range. It is actually also found in New Zealand, where it is a pest. So they do eat the eggs of ground nesting birds there. But this is its natural range shown on the map. There are 14 to 17 different species worldwide of hedgehog. That number varies depending on which taxonomist you talk to. We've put 3 examples here on the right, which are the Ethiopian, Algerian, and long-eared hedgehogs, just to show a bit of the variety that hedgehogs come in. And hedgehogs are part of their own family. Their closest relatives are thought to be the shrews and moles, but they sit on their own in their own family. They're the UK's only spiny mammal. And they can live they can live up to 10 years, but in the wild, the average is about 3 years old. And the other thing is they have around 4,000 to 5,000 spines. And those spines are actually just modified hairs. So they're made of...
I've got it, Marion.
I think we've got someone not on mute. So if you could just pop yourselves on mute.
Come up here.
There's a little microphone. There should be a little microphone symbol in the bottom left, I think. If you could click on that and unmute yourself, that would be brilliant. Yeah, so spines, yep, modified hairs.
It came up the way it always does.
Same stuff as our hair and our fingernails. I'll just wait for whoever it is that's just come in just to mute yourself, because otherwise it's just going to be a little bit confusing. So hopefully you've managed to find that microphone picture now and muted yourself. Great. Here we go. So a bit about the cultural significance of hedgehogs, because hedgehogs don't really come up much in folklore, but they do come up a lot generally, and have been important to many different cultures. So up on the top left here, we've actually got a little figurine from ancient Egypt. So in ancient Egyptian times, the people would have seen the hedgehogs there. So it wouldn't have been the Western European hedgehog, obviously. It would have been one of the 2 species they have there. And those species actually, when food is scarce, they'll go underground and stay under there until food becomes more abundant, when they will come out again and feed. And because of this reason, people thought that they'd like risen from the dead. So they were associated with rebirth. And so people would wear amulets of hedgehogs and place little figurines inside tombs because of that association with rebirth. In Mongolia, there's a lot about hedgehogs being bad luck if they enter your home, because a hedgehog walks with its head down, hidden away, and so it's thought of as untrustworthy. But at the same time, they believed that if you put a skin of a hedgehog at the front of your door, that this could actually ward off bad things, so a protector as well. And in Europe, hedgehogs come up in a lot of illustrations from the 13th century onwards, mostly stealing fruit. So it was thought that hedgehogs would roll onto the fruit. Fruit would get stuck on their spines, so especially apples, mushrooms, and grapes. And then they would carry them off to their secret storage and gobble them all up. And this even comes up in Pliny's natural history manuscript, which was the first natural history manuscript to be published in 1469, although it was written a lot earlier than that, in before AD 79. Obviously, Pliny didn't see this behavior happening, and it's questionable whether he actually observed a lot of the things that he spoke about in that book. But yeah, it was really believed that this was the case, and people also believed that hedgehogs would steal milk from cows at night and also eat chicken eggs. And hedgehogs can eat chicken eggs if they're damaged already or broken, but it's unlikely hedgehogs can break into chicken eggs. But unfortunately, all of these beliefs led to the Vermin Act, which put a bounty on hedgehog heads and offered a reward for dead hedgehogs being brought in. So it was by the English Parliament, but also the church. And it's estimated that between 1600 and 1800, around 500,000 hedgehogs were killed because of this. So yeah, massive significance and impact on the population there. And it really wasn't until the Tale of Mrs. Tiggywinkle by Beatrix Potter was published in 1905 that people's thinking of hedgehogs actually changed, and people started to really love hedgehogs, and they got their kind of status as Britain's favourite mammal that they have today. Really, thanks to Beatrix Potter starting this off. So yeah, really, really important children's book there. So that was a bit of an interlude. But back to the facts. So we're going to talk a little bit about their diet. So their diet changes throughout the year, depending on what is available. In spring, hedgehogs would be more reliant on things like leather jacket larvae. And then if we look at this graph here, you can see the top things that they're going to be eating are beetles, earwigs, caterpillars, millipedes, worms. This kind of changes depending on which study you look at. Most studies are based on the stomach contents of dead hedgehogs. It can vary slightly, but yeah, beetles being the main thing that hedgehogs will eat. Interestingly, slugs don't come up in this one, but if you had the choice between a crunchy beetle and a slimy old slug, I guess you'd go for the beetle. And hedgehogs are opportunists, so they're omnivores. They will eat lots of other things, bird eggs if they come across them, not chicken eggs, but smaller bird eggs. Things like even snakes. People have reported hedgehogs to be eating. So yeah, all sorts of different things they will eat up. Their behaviour. So we all probably know that hedgehogs are nocturnal. They come out at night. They're solitary. They don't like to hang out with each other. They're non-territorial. So you won't see a hedgehog fighting over territory, although you might see one fighting over mates or even food. They do actually have very long legs, as you can see up here on the top left. And they can run at surprisingly quick speeds, so up to 7 miles an hour, or 7 kilometers an hour even. And they can also climb and they can swim. Breeding starts at 2 years old, and it starts in May with quite noisy courtship. So you might be lucky enough to hear this in your garden. And the courtship, it generally, so the male will circle the female, and there'll be lots of kind of snuffling noises, and all of this commotion can actually attract rival males, which will then come in and try to fight that first male. There'll be headbutting and chasing. So yeah, quite a commotion really, and you might hear it in your garden in May. The hoglets are born in June, and the litter sizes tend to be around 4 to 5 hoglets, and they can actually have multiple fathers per litter. Unfortunately, around 2/3 of that litter are unlikely to survive their first year. But yeah, hopefully they all leave the nest at 3 to 4 weeks to forage with their mother. And then they are independent at 5 to 6 weeks. And you can see here the diagram from Hedgehog Street, which just shows their life cycle throughout the year. The birth of hoglets can actually go on until kind of late summer or early autumn. So that is the second brood. But a lot of experts say that second brood is highly unlikely to survive hibernation because they don't have the time to feed up and get to the weight that they need to be. So that's where you get what we call autumn orphans, and they're the ones that might need your help. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. So yeah, females will try and have a second litter, but not necessarily particularly successful. And then of course they go into hibernation, and we're about that time now. So I've put October to March here, but that really does depend on the weather, where you live in the country, and also the individual hedgehogs. So a big male could potentially go into hibernation in September if it's put on enough weight and it's cold enough. Whereas females tend to go into hibernation a little bit later because they need a bit more time to feed up after bringing up their young. And really, like, hedgehogs being out in November or even December is not unusual. We've had a hedgehog in our garden this week and we're in mid-November, and that's absolutely fine, especially down in Devon. When they do go into hibernation, they drop their body temperatures to around the same temperature as the surrounding air, and their metabolic rate really drops. So all normal activity is ceased, and they just live off their fat reserves that they've built up over the summer. They don't necessarily have a constant hibernation throughout the whole winter. They can actually get up and move. They might move nest. There are actually reports of hedgehogs even swapping nests. And if it's mild, they might get up to have a bit of a feed. So if a hedgehog's out at night in the winter, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Although obviously in the winter, their insect prey is a lot more difficult to come by. So really, ideally, if winter is cold and they stay in hibernation and like maybe just wake up 1 or 2 times to move nest, then that's great. If they keep waking up because it's really, really mild, then that could actually deplete their fat stores if they can't find enough prey, which could be a bit of a problem. Okay, so I've mentioned nests. So there are actually 3 different types of nest. So we've got here day nests. So they are during the active season, during the spring, summer, and early autumn. And this is where your hedgehogs are gonna go in the daytime to hide away and have a sleep. So these are gonna be quite flimsy, really just like a pile of leaves or even just long grass, somewhere for them to hide away. Maternity nests are needing to be a lot more structured because they need to provide protection for the young. And then hibernation nests are the big ones. So they're the ones that they take between 1 and 4 days to make, and they can be up to 60 centimeters in diameter. And they obviously need to be really well insulated, so they're going to be really, really packed full of leaves. And there's actually been a study by Pat Morris in London, and he showed that the nests will stay between 1 and 5 degrees Celsius, even when the ambient temperatures vary between -8 and 10 degrees Celsius. So that really shows quite how insulated these nests are. And they need to be somewhere that provides shelter to help with that. So often they'll be found underneath brambles. Brambles are, I think, the most popular kind of site for hedgehogs to go into. But places like under your shed as well are really important. So this just shows the importance of a little wild patch at the end of your garden, but also hedgerows and brambles especially. Okay, so yeah, so habitat. So like I just mentioned, hedgehogs need brambles and scrub that they can nest under and also provide a lot of their insect prey. They need short grass and long grass for foraging, and that long grass is going to be really good for those active day nests as well. They need leaf litter to make those hibernation nests and to find prey. And actually our urban areas, towns and cities are brilliant because they have all of these things as long as there is good connection throughout. And they're going to be able to provide all of these different habitats. So we've got here limiting factor to presence, not enough hibernation nest options. They need the right size leaves. So hedgehogs are a bit picky actually. Sycamore leaves are too big and willow leaves are too small for their nests. So they need a nice variety of native medium-sized leaves, and they need that available structure for building a nest under. So yeah, like I spoke about, brambles or next to a wall, under a shed, or in a hedgerow. And I mentioned connection. So we did once think that hedgehogs would maybe only roam the size of like 1 or 2 gardens. But in the 1980s, there was a study, and it radio tracked hedgehogs. And this map shows, well, male 106, which was radio tracked over an 18-hole golf course, which was 40 hectares in size. And it also used a few gardens around the surrounding area for supplementary feeding. And this really showed that hedgehogs were traveling a lot further than we ever thought. The average is now thought to be 2 kilometers a night that they'll travel, with males traveling up to 3 kilometers in search of mates in the breeding season. So that map can be found on the British Hedgehog Preservation Society website, and yeah, it's just interesting to show how much space a hedgehog really does need, and how important it is that they can move throughout the landscape. Population status. So a good place to look if you want more information about population is the State of Britain's Hedgehogs, the most recent one being released in 2018, and that's by the British Hedgehog Preservation Society and the People's Trust for Endangered Species. And this document states that since the year 2000, rural populations have declined by at least a half, and urban populations have declined by up to a third. So I think we all probably know hedgehogs are in decline, but that really does show quite how much. It's very difficult to estimate exact estimate hedgehog numbers, because they're solitary and they're nocturnal. In 1995, there was a study that people think of as quite reliable, which put their population at 1.5 million. And as you can see from there, that that's really dropped since then. And they worked that out through in rural areas roadkill surveys, and also garden surveys in more urban areas. So they really do need a little bit of a helping hand. What is causing this decline? Well, this top photo just shows habitat fragmentation is a big one. If hedgehogs can't move throughout the landscape, then they can't thrive. So in rural areas, this is through larger field sizes and hedgerows being taken up. They get rid of all of those lovely corridors that hedgehogs really need. Agricultural intensification, so soil invertebrates are a lot less common than they once were. So their prey are really depleted. Lots of hedgerows, as I mentioned, corridors, but also, as we know now, hedgerows provide that protection, nesting sites, as well as feeding locations, and yeah, prey availability. I thought I'd just put in here about Action for Insects quickly. So it's our relatively new campaign from Devon Wildlife Trust. It's worth having a look. So Action for Insects is all about how we can help our insects, and therefore hedgehogs and all other wildlife and ourselves. If you go onto the Devon Wildlife Trust website, then there's 2 really brilliant guides, one for individuals in their gardens and one for communities. So, helping insects on a wider neighborhood level. There's loads of really good ideas and examples of where people have done it elsewhere. And so I really encourage you to have a look at that. Some more causes of decline, roadkill. So it's estimated, well, the estimates actually vary hugely, but it's estimated that about 100,000 hedgehogs die on the roads every year. So that, obviously is not a sustainable number considering the overall population. Impermeable boundaries, so fences, walls, concreted over front gardens. These are all going to stop our hedgehogs moving through over landscapes. Strimming and flailing. So hedgehogs don't have a flight reflex. Their main way of protecting themselves obviously is to roll up into a ball with their spines. So strimming and flailing, they've got no chance. So it's really, really important if you're going to strim that you check the area first for hedgehogs. And we're addicted to tidiness. You know, we trim our hedges, we get rid of all our little wild spots, and we like short lawns. So if you can make more wild areas, or just areas that are a little bit untidy, that really helps. And lastly, I just wanted to mention badgers. So badgers are the only and main UK predator of hedgehogs. They're the only thing strong enough to be able to unroll hedgehogs. But hedgehogs are in decline at the same rate, no matter whether they're in a location in the country where there's a high or a low population of badgers. So really it is habitat fragmentation and lack of insect prey that is causing the decline of hedgehogs, not predation by badgers. Badgers do actually also compete for food. So earthworms are a big source of food for both. So they do have some competition there from badgers. And the more we degrade habitat and reduce it, then the more open to predation hedgehogs become, and the more vulnerable they are to losing their prey. So yeah, we definitely would not support conserving one species by culling another. Okay, so that's the kind of depressing bit. And now how can you help? The first thing to think about is hedgehog safety. So go out into your garden or your community space and do a little bit of an audit. Is it safe for hedgehogs? Ditches can be a real hazard, or ditches and drains can be a real hazard for hedgehogs. So make sure they're covered over or there's a ramp in and out. Netting can cause entanglement. So make sure your netting is up and tight and not loose, or ideally don't use it, but I know sometimes you have to. Definitely check it fairly regularly to make sure that there aren't any little hedgehogs that have got caught up in there. And ponds, amazing for wildlife, amazing for hedgehogs, unless they are steep-sided and the hedgehog can't get out. So hedgehogs are actually really good swimmers, but if they fall into a pond and swim around and run out of energy and can't get out, then they will drown. So make sure you put a little ramp in, or better still, make sure that the slopes are shallow so that the hedgehogs and other wildlife can get in and have a little drink and easily climb out again. It's past bonfire night now, but people are still having bonfires. So obviously bonfires look like a bonfire to us, look like a lovely cozy space for a hedgehog to curl up for the winter to a hedgehog. So we really recommend making bonfire piles on the day that you're going to light them. If you can't do that, move them on the day, or make a barrier around them. And even if you do all of this, make sure you only light it from one side, so that if there is still a hedgehog in there, which hopefully there isn't, it can still escape out the other side. And make sure you check before you trim, because none of us want hedgehog injury by a strimmer. And this is where we would normally talk a bit about stopping use of slug pellets in your garden. But really good news very recently is that slug pellets that contain metaldehyde are being banned from the end of March 2022. And the sale of slug pellets with metaldehyde is actually being banned from the end of March 2021. But there is a grace period of a year for people to use up their slug pellet supply, although obviously we wouldn't recommend that. We'd recommend you get rid of it. So you should bring it to a disposal site rather than put it in your household waste. So yeah, brilliant news for wildlife in general, especially hedgehogs. So yeah, really, really, really great. But what do you do to stop the slugs eating your lettuce? I know slug pellets are quite popular, you know, on allotments and things, because it's so difficult when you put all that effort in and then a slug comes along and eats it all. So I thought I'd put in a little slide about what you can do to stop slugs. And if anyone's got any ideas at the end, please do share. But the best thing you can do is to attract their predators. So obviously hedgehogs, but also birds and frogs. Because if you rely on pesticides, then it completely eliminates all of the slugs. And so therefore the predators won't come in and you're then reliant on the pesticide. So if you can have a much more natural cycle in your garden, it's a lot more sustainable. You can go out at night with a torch and pick off the slugs and destroy them. One thing to think about is when you water your plants, don't water them in the evening. Slugs love moisture, so they will be loving life if you go out and water in the evening. You can use barriers. So there's an example of a plastic, I think it's like a bottle cut up and put over a particularly vulnerable plant there. Or you can try copper rings, or copper tape, which give the slug a little electric shock when it goes across it. I found quite a good website where someone had experimented with all different sorts of barriers for snails, actually. And the most effective one they reckoned were brambles. So if you had some particularly vulnerable plants you wanted to protect, you could try putting some bramble around that plant. Apparently that works pretty well. And of course you could put bear traps out. If you're going to do that, just make sure that the container with the beer in it is slightly above ground level to stop caterpillars, well, things like beetles falling in. And you might also want to put a lid on the top, like a loose fitting lid, slightly elevated to stop things falling in. Or you can do things like choose crops that are particularly pest resistant, or even put in a line of sacrificial lettuces. That's what I've done in the past, is put a line in and thought, okay, you know, slugs can have that line and I'll have the middle lines. So that can be good too. Next up is give hedgehogs a door. So I really should have put this first, because if your garden is brilliant for hedgehogs but they can't get in, then they're not going to benefit. So making a hole in your fence is really important. Best thing you can do for hedgehogs. You only need a hole 13 by 13 centimeters in size, which will stop most pets getting through, but is big enough for a hedgehog. If you don't want to cut through your fence or wall, then you can tunnel under. That's what we've got in our garden, a little tunnel underneath the fence, and the hedgehogs will do fine just going under there. One thing to just make sure about is to make sure that you don't put your hole in a fence that leads to a road, because that's, you know, opening your hedgehog up to getting run over. So make sure that the hole goes to another garden or pathway or green space. Okay, so food. So you may want to help your hedgehogs out, especially at this time of year, by feeding them some supplementary food. I think probably most people will know by now that milk and bread are big no-nos. So hedgehogs are lactose intolerant. Milk can make their tummies really bad. The only liquid hedgehogs need is water. So just put water out, no milk. Bread fills them up, but it has no nutritional value. So again, no bread. We did once think that mealworms were good, but we say not to do that anymore because it can cause metabolic bone disease. So what you really want to be putting out is meaty cat or dog food, or cat or dog biscuits. And if you're going to put biscuits out, it's even more important that you put water with them, because obviously they're dry. You might want to set up a little feeding station if you don't want to attract the local cats. The ones at the bottom here, it just shows it's a very simple plastic box with your 13 by 13 centimeter hole in the end, and then your food in the other end, and lid on, brick on the top, stop anything from getting in. It keeps the food dry as well, which is useful in the rain. But that food will only ever be supplementary, so your hedgehogs should never become reliant on it, and it's been proven that they just use it as a supplement. The best thing you can do is make your garden full of natural food. So put a log pile, make a little log pile, really good for beetles and other things that the hedgehogs are going to really enjoy. It also could be a really good hibernation spot. Leave your herbaceous perennials over the winter. They're going to be really good for overwintering insects. And if you can, a patch of nettles are really great. Loads of butterflies use nettles for their caterpillar main food source. So caterpillars, as we know, are an important hedgehog food item. So and actually nettles are a really good summer nesting site as well. So a nice nettle patch in a sunny area, not just at the bottom behind your shed, needs to be in a nice sunny area, is brilliant for wildlife. And of course, putting in a pond is probably top thing you can do in your garden for wildlife. Again, as we mentioned before, make sure it's got sloping sides. And we've also got here a leaf pile. You can leave a little pile of leaves for hedgehogs to make their hibernation nests with. And we've got here a log pile, which has actually even got a little hole in for the hibernating hedgehog to go in. So it's perfect. The wider landscape, we always hope there will be more hedgerows, better, richer meadows, and more joined up landscape. And the other thing is cattle grids can, like ditches and drains, be really big hazards for hedgehogs. So a little ramp in and out for hedgehogs and other small mammals is really important. And how do you know if you've got a hedgehog in your garden? So the easiest thing to look for is their poo. So hedgehog poo is black and shiny. So it's got the beetle cases in it, which gives it that shininess. So you can have a look out for that. You can also get footprint tunnels. So the idea here is that there's an ink pad at one end and you put a bit of food at the other. Hedgehog goes over the ink pad and then over the paper, which leaves the footprints, which you can identify later. And on the left here, you can see a hedgehog footprint, or you can Google it and identify it that way. You can buy them, they're quite expensive, or you can make them. There are some instructions online. And then the other thing you can do is have a camera. So you might have a camera trap, like a motion detect camera, or like me, you might have a security camera that you put behind your shed. So last week, we've only just moved into our new house, and last week we put up a little camera behind our shed, and here we've got our little hedgehog, and it's so exciting. It's one of the loveliest things that you can find in your garden, and we were well chuffed. So it really is very rewarding to be able to do all these things and then to be able to have the visitors. And another thing you can do is you can sign up to become a hedgehog champion with Devon Wildlife Trust. So at the moment, I can't send out the packs because I can't get into the office because of lockdown. But when I can, you can sign up on the website, or you just Google Help a Hog Devon and it should come up. There you would then get a little pack which contains posters to put up in your local community. And it also has some leaflets and some postcards showing the size of the hole you need. And the idea is that you give your neighbours these and make a whole hedgehog highway and connect up all your gardens, because as we know, hedgehogs need that 2 kilometre space to be able to roam. So we need everybody to join up and do this. And you also get a bit of a fact sheet. So it's a really good thing to do. You can become part of the Facebook group as well and share ideas. It's a fairly new thing we're doing. So yeah, do sign up, but be patient with your pack. Oh, the other thing to say actually here is just make sure you record your sightings of hedgehogs. So you can do that via the Hedgehog Street big hedgehog map. Because yeah, as I mentioned before, it's very difficult to estimate hedgehog numbers. So the more people that send in their sightings, the better. And as it's autumn, I thought I couldn't not mention hedgehog care. So a lot of people at this kind of time of year, we get inquiries about if they've seen a hedgehog in their garden and they're worried. So no specific weight will guarantee survival over winter, but those hibernating at less than 450 grams are probably not going to survive. So they are going to need help. So it says here, we should normally be rescued, hedgehogs should normally be rescued at weights less than 450 grams in October till February. So if you do see a really small hedgehog, pop on some gardening gloves, put it in a cardboard box with a fleece or something that the hedgehog can hide under. A warm hot water bottle is good, as long as they can get on and off the hot water bottle as they need. Keep it hot as well. Give them a bit of food and water, and then ring your local rehabilitator. If you don't know who that is, you can ring the British Hedgehog Preservation Society, and the number's down there, or you can Google it, and they will be able to give you a bit of advice and pass you on to your local hedgehog hospital. Rescue at 500 grams and above is unnecessary based on weight alone. But if you do see a hedgehog out in the daytime now, then it's likely that that hedgehog is unwell and needs help, especially if it looks kind of dizzy or disorientated. Earlier in the year, just as a note, if you see a hedgehog out in the daytime, it doesn't necessarily mean it's unwell, as long as it looks like it's going somewhere and it's doing a thing. It's likely to be a female kind of just getting a bit of extra food, break from the nest. But at this time of year, yeah, a hedgehog out in the day, and any time of year, a hedgehog kind of sunbathing is not a good thing and needs to be rescued. And that's all for my hedgehog talk. So I think Simon's going to come back in, and John. So if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them now, or you can always email me as well. So I hope you've enjoyed it, and back over to Simon.
Thank you, Jazz. That's very, very interesting and very enjoyable. We've had quite a few people coming in with the questions, and John's, I think, going to activate those for us. So, John, if you could unmute and pass them on to Jazz, that would be great.
I have unmuted. Yeah. Okay. You there, Jazz? Yeah.
Yeah.
Some questions before the talk. Actually, there was a couple, one or two about badgers and hedgehogs again, which you partly covered. Jenny Parr says that she discovered a carcass with the spines ripped off and it had been skinned. Is that likely to be a badger, or what else could it have been?
Yeah, I think I mean, badgers are the only animals that are going to be strong enough to unroll a hedgehog. So yeah, I mean, probably it would have been a badger. The only other thing that could potentially have happened is if the hedgehog had already died and then something was scavenging on that hedgehog. That would be the only other thing I could think of. But yeah, likely to be a badger is the only UK predator of hedgehogs.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So Chris and Tim Callard said at this time of the year, should you continue to feed the hedgehogs? Will it discourage them from hibernating?
Yeah, so now is actually probably the most important time to feed your hedgehogs, because if they haven't put on that weight, or they need to quickly feed up so that they're ready for hibernation. So if there's a hedgehog that kind of is maybe slightly above that 450 grams, but like not quite, it is needing to feed up really quickly. So putting out a bit of extra food is gonna just get them ready for hibernation. So definitely, it's not going to discourage them from hibernating.
Yeah. They'll decide when they want to eat and when they want to hibernate.
Yeah.
Brilliant. And you talked about feed. My daughter's got hedgehogs in her garden, and I know she's also got rats, and they're trying to find a way of feeding the hedgehogs without feeding the rats. Is there a solution to that, or is that just impossible?
It's a really difficult one, isn't it? one thing to think about is potentially feeding with hedgehog. I didn't actually mention hedgehog biscuits, like specific hedgehog food you can buy at pet stores and things. So that might be kind of slightly less appealing to rats than the wet, meaty dog and cat food. The other thing I've read is that you can potentially put off rats by either planting mint around your feeding station, or even someone had tried spraying mint like oil around to kind of put the rats off. Apparently they don't like mint very much. The other thing you might think about is with your hedgehog feeding station and the 13 centimeter hole, you could put a little flap on there so the hedgehog would be able to push through, but the rat wouldn't. So kind of like maybe even a cat flap, or you know, or just kind of get like a little bit of plastic with a bit of gaff tape or something. But yeah, it's a tricky one, that.
Or possibly get a Jack Russell for the rats. Okay, Robin Aronson said, can dogs injure or kill hedgehogs?
It's unlikely. I think, you know, most hedgehogs would just roll up into a ball, and probably the hedgehog would do more damage to the dog than the other way around. One thing, if you're worried about it, hedgehogs do seem to have a bit of a routine. So if you can work out when your hedgehogs are coming through the garden, and then don't let your dog out at that time, then that could be a way to kind of keep them separate. Or if you're letting your dog out, open the door and make a lot of sound so that the hedgehog is warned and can run away. Then that's
retreat. Yeah.
Or not run away. Yeah, retreat. Yeah, because they don't have that flight reflex. So if the dog is actually up next to the hedgehog, then it is just going to roll up rather than run away.
Okay. Heather Nixon said, traps, is there any recommendation for hedgehog traps? Well, I think she means cameras, camera traps.
Okay. I don't have any particular make of hedgehog. Yeah, camera trap. Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah, got that.
Yeah, I don't have any particular recommendation though of camera traps. I know we buy ours from NHBS. I think they have a few options, ranging from, you know, like cheap to super expensive.
What are you starting at price wise for camera trap? I think
they start kind of early, like the kind of like £100 up kind of mark. So they are quite expensive. You know, if you want to find out but you don't want to buy the camera, you can always you know, try one of the footprint tunnels. So they're expensive, but they're a lovely thing to have, and they last, you know, a long time. So
yeah, that's right. Okay, just let me just check in on some that have recently come in. Okay. We have a 90% walled garden. Can a hedgehog be persuaded to climb over a wall?
It depends how high the wall is. I think if it's a walled garden, I would imagine not. If it's a small wall covered in ivy, you know, like a kind of, well, you saw my wall at the back of my garden. It's very rubbly, so they, you know, they can climb over that. But a walled garden, I'm imagining it's vertical brick walls, so I would say no. Probably, you know, if you can make that tunnel underneath the wall, then that could maybe work. And you can even you can drill through walls. You can get special kind of drills that will go through, like, you know, with a big hole. But yeah, it's a real tricky one. Or leave the gate open. But obviously, if it's a walled garden, I don't know if you grow veg, but you then know leaving yourself open to rabbits and things as well. So a bit of a balance.
Have they got good memories? Do they once they found a way in? Are they pretty good at finding the way out again? And
well, I mean, I don't know any scientific research on that, but they do seem to be able to kind of come in and out, don't they, quite easily. And they do have, it has been shown that they have got this kind of routine. So yeah, I guess they do have quite a good memory for the routes that they tend to take, and the gardens they know have got food out and similar.
Right. Okay. That's it. Here's another one. Janie Jones. Does the Wildlife Trust do any work with commercial gardening companies to educate and give awareness to the companies about how to help create hedgehog friendly gardens for their clients?
We don't at the moment. We don't have any, like, we don't kind of seek them out. We do have a lot of information on our website about hedgehogs and also just generally wildlife friendly gardening. But we don't, no, we do. It's not something we do. We have started working with allotment societies.
Yeah.
So that's, I know that's not the question, but you know, it's another big one, big way of kind of getting the word out. But yeah, interesting idea, and yeah, something I will bear in mind actually for the future. So thanks for that one.
Okay. Yeah. Worth thinking about. On the cameras, on the camera traps, somebody said Browning are very good, and somebody else said I bought a Venture trail camera for about 60 quid from Amazon, and also needed a memory card and rechargeable batteries. Yeah, so there's quite a range of camera traps available. Is it possible to encourage and establish hedgehogs if there are definitely badgers on the land?
Yeah, definitely. Like as I mentioned before, if there's enough habitat and enough food, then badgers and hedgehogs should be able to live really happily alongside each other, as they have done for 5,000 or more years. So yeah, not a problem, as long as there is that habitat availability and they're not in competition with each other.
Okay, I think that's the extent of the questions. So thanks for that, Jazz.
Brilliant, Jasmine. Thank you so much. That's an excellent talk, and we've all thoroughly enjoyed it. I've certainly learned lots I didn't know about hedgehogs. It's amazing how popular they are, and we get quite a bit of correspondence from members saying, we found hedgehogs, what do we do about it? So you filled in a lot of gaps in people's knowledge there. Thank you so much. So,
thank you for having me.
not at all. We have one or two other questions coming. I don't think I perhaps made myself as clear as I could have done about the crowdfunding in particular. Basically, it's called Devon's Meadow Makers, and the information about the crowdfunding project there, which is, as I said, to create a hub that will share knowledge and expertise and access to equipment, and also distribute seeds for people interested in making wildflower meadows. If you go onto the DWT main website, it's very easy to find on the front page there, and you can just click on that and find out all the information that you want about that. And similarly about the new reserve at Idford, there's information on there. In fact, a nice little video too showing what it looks like. So I heartily recommend that to you. So it just remains for me to thank you all for coming, and to remind you that our next talk will be on the 15th of December. About climate change, weather, and the effects on wildlife, which will be given to us by Vicky Pope. So same time and same mechanism for getting here. Hopefully we'll make it all run as smoothly as possible. But thank you so much to everybody. And with that in mind, we're getting lots of positive feedback, Jazz, as you can see here. So thank you again for your talk, and we'll see you all next time.
Okay. Thank you, Simon. Great.